Margaret Chen hadn't heard her mother say her name in 241 days. 8 months. 34 weeks. 5,784 hours. That's how long Alzheimer's had stolen her mother away. Every day, Margaret would visit room 407 at Stanford Medical Center. Every day, she would sit beside her mother's bed. Every day, she would say, "Mom, it's me. It's Margaret." And every day, her mother would stare past her with empty, confused eyes. No recognition. No memory. No connection. The doctors said it was permanent. Advanced stage Alzheimer's doesn't reverse. The woman Margaret knew as Mom was gone forever. But on the night of March 19, 1984, a night nurse named Karen Williams did something unusual. She turned on the television in room 407. The Tonight Show was just starting. Johnny Carson walked through those curtains. And when his voice filled that hospital room, Margaret's mother turned her head. Her eyes focused. And she whispered a name she hadn't spoken in 8 months. Robert. Her husband's name. The man who had been dead for 3 years. Margaret started crying. Because her mother was back. And for the next 11 minutes, they had a conversation that medicine said was impossible. If you're already feeling this story, drop a like right now and tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. Because what you're about to hear will change the way you think about memory, love, and the power of a human voice. Her name was Eleanor Chen. She was 82 years old. Silver hair that her daughter still brushed every morning. Hands that had once sewn dresses, cooked meals, and held her children. Eyes that had once sparkled with intelligence and humor. But Alzheimer's disease had taken all of that away. Stage 6 Alzheimer's. Advanced deterioration. Severe cognitive decline. Eleanor couldn't remember her daughter's name. She couldn't remember she'd been married for 54 years. She couldn't remember the house she'd lived in for 4 decades. Most days, she couldn't even remember her own name. Margaret Chen was 54 years old when her mother stopped recognizing her. It happened gradually at first. A forgotten conversation here. A repeated question there. Confusion about what day it was. But then it accelerated. Within 6 months, Eleanor couldn't dress herself. She would forget she'd already eaten breakfast and ask for it again. She would introduce herself to Margaret every single morning, as if they were strangers. "Hello, dear. What's your name?" "I'm Margaret, Mom. I'm your daughter." Eleanor would smile politely, the way you smile at a kind stranger. "Oh, that's a lovely name." And then, moments later, she would ask again. By July 1983, Eleanor couldn't live at home anymore. Margaret had tried everything. She'd hired full-time caregivers. She'd moved her mother into her own house. She'd taken a leave of absence from her job as a librarian. But Alzheimer's is relentless. Eleanor wandered at night. She forgot how to use the bathroom. She became agitated, frightened, sometimes aggressive when she didn't understand where she was. The doctors at Stanford Medical Center recommended 24-hour care. Margaret made the hardest decision of her life. She placed her mother in the neurology wing. Room 407. A private room with a window overlooking the hospital garden. Margaret brought photographs. She brought her mother's favorite blanket. She brought a small radio that played the music Eleanor had loved in the 1950s. But nothing helped. Eleanor didn't recognize the photographs. She pulled the blanket off, confused about why it was there. She stared at the radio like she'd never seen one before. The doctors told Margaret to prepare herself. "Your mother is in the advanced stages. The progression is only going to continue. She may live for several more years, but the woman you knew isn't coming back." Margaret refused to believe it. Every single day for 8 months, she visited room 407. She would sit in the chair beside her mother's bed. She would hold Eleanor's hand. She would tell her stories about her childhood, about her father, about family memories. And every day, Eleanor would stare at her with those empty, confused eyes. "Who are you?" "I'm Margaret, Mom. I'm your daughter." "Oh, that's nice." A pause. "Who are you?" The same question. Over and over and over. 241 days of this. Margaret was breaking. She would cry in her car after every visit. She stopped sleeping more than 3 or 4 hours a night. She started seeing a therapist just to process the grief of watching her mother disappear while still being alive. "It's like she died," Margaret told her therapist, but her body forgot to stop. Then March 19, 1984 happened. Margaret had visited earlier that day, like she always did. 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. 2 hours sitting beside her mother. 2 hours of one-sided conversation. 2 hours of holding the hand of a stranger who used to be her mom. Before she left, Margaret did something she'd been doing every day for weeks. She leaned close to her mother and whispered, "I love you, Mom. I'll see you tomorrow?" Eleanor looked at her blankly. "Who are you?" Margaret left the hospital in tears. She went home. She made dinner for herself but didn't eat it. She sat in her living room staring at old family photographs. Her mother teaching her to ride a bike. Her mother at Margaret's wedding. Her mother holding Margaret's son, her grandson, for the first time. All of those memories were gone. Erased. Lost forever in the fog of Alzheimer's. Margaret fell asleep on her couch around 9 p.m., exhausted from grief. At Stanford Medical Center, the night shift was beginning. Karen Williams had been a registered nurse for 11 years. She specialized in neurology. She'd seen dozens of Alzheimer's patients. She knew the progression. She knew the signs. She knew that once you reached stage 6, there was no coming back. Room 407 was one of her regular check-ins. Eleanor Chen. 82 years old. Advanced Alzheimer's. Karen would check Eleanor's vitals every 2 hours. Blood pressure. Pulse. Temperature. Make sure she was comfortable. Adjust her pillows. Offer water. Eleanor rarely responded. She would stare at the ceiling. Sometimes she would mumble incoherently. Sometimes she would try to get out of bed, confused about where she was. Karen had learned to be patient, gentle, calm. On the night of March 19, Karen entered room 407 at 11:15 p.m. Eleanor was agitated. She was sitting up in bed, pulling at her blankets, making distressed sounds. Not quite words, just noises of confusion and frustration. Karen approached slowly. "Hi, Eleanor. It's Karen. I'm your nurse. You're safe. You're okay." Eleanor didn't seem to hear her. She kept pulling at the blankets. Her breathing was fast. Her eyes were unfocused, darting around the room. Karen tried everything she'd been trained to do. Soft voice. Gentle touch. Reassurance. Nothing worked. Eleanor was becoming more agitated by the second. Karen made a decision. Sometimes, with Alzheimer's patients, distraction was the most effective tool. She walked over to the small television mounted in the corner of the room. The hospital provided cable in all private rooms. Karen turned it on, hoping the soft sound and light might calm Eleanor down. The screen flickered to life. It was 11:28 p.m. NBC was broadcasting The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. The familiar theme music played. Ed McMahon's voice boomed, "From Hollywood. The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson." The audience applauded. And then Johnny Carson walked through those curtains. Gray hair perfectly styled. Sharp suit and tie. That signature confident smile. He waved to the audience and took his position behind the desk. Karen glanced back at Eleanor, expecting her to still be agitated. But Eleanor had stopped pulling at her blankets. She had turned her head toward the television. Her eyes were focused. Really focused. For the first time in 8 months, Eleanor Chen was looking at something with intention. Karen froze. Johnny Carson began his monologue. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You know, I was reading the news today, and I have to tell you, politicians are getting more creative with their excuses." The audience laughed. And Eleanor smiled. Not a confused smile. Not a vacant smile. A real smile. The kind of smile that showed recognition. Karen's heart started pounding. "Eleanor," she said softly. Eleanor didn't look away from the television. But she spoke. Clear. Coherent. Calm. "That's Johnny. Robert loves Johnny." Karen felt her breath catch. Robert was Eleanor's husband. He had died 3 years earlier. But Eleanor hadn't spoken his name in over 8 months. The doctors had said she'd forgotten he existed. Karen stepped closer. "Eleanor, who is Robert?" Eleanor's eyes stayed on the television. "My husband. We watch Johnny every night. Robert thinks he's the funniest man on television." Karen's hands started trembling. She quickly walked to the nurse's station and picked up the phone. "This is Karen Williams in neurology. I need Dr. Chen to come to room 407 immediately." "Yes, now. It's urgent." Dr. Patricia Chen had been studying Alzheimer's disease for 17 years. She was one of the leading neurologists at Stanford Medical Center. She'd published papers on memory loss, cognitive decline, and neural deterioration. She thought she'd seen everything. But when she walked into room 407 at 11:34 p.m. on March 19, 1984, she saw something that shouldn't have been possible. Eleanor Chen was sitting up in bed, watching The Tonight Show. And she was talking. Not mumbling. Not confused fragments. Full sentences. Johnny always opens with the politicians, Eleanor was saying to Karen. That's his best material. Robert and I used to watch this every night before bed. He'd practice Johnny's golf swing in the morning. Dr. Chen stood in the doorway, stunned. Mrs. Chen, she said carefully. Eleanor turned toward her voice. Yes? Do you know where you are? Eleanor looked around the room. Stanford Medical. I've been sick, haven't I? Alzheimer's. I can't remember much anymore. She paused, her eyes drifting back to the television. But I remember Johnny. I always remember Johnny. Dr. Chen approached slowly. Mrs. Chen, do you know who I am? Eleanor studied her face. Dr. Chen. You're my neurologist. And you're Margaret's doctor too. No, wait. That doesn't sound right. She frowned, confused. Margaret is my daughter. You take care of me. Dr. Chen felt chills run down her spine. Eleanor hadn't said her daughter's name in 241 days. Mrs. Chen, what year is it? Eleanor hesitated. I'm not sure. 1984? Maybe 1983? It's 1984. March 19th. Eleanor nodded slowly. March. Spring's coming. Robert loved spring. He'd plant tomatoes in the garden every April. Her voice wavered. Robert died, didn't he? Yes, ma'am. 3 years ago. Tears filled Eleanor's eyes. I forget that sometimes. I forget a lot of things. She looked at Dr. Chen. Am I going to forget everything? Dr. Chen didn't know how to answer. Because scientifically, Eleanor should have already forgotten everything. But somehow, right now, she was completely lucid. Let me ask you something, Mrs. Chen. How do you feel when you hear Johnny Carson's voice? Eleanor turned back to the television, where Johnny was finishing a joke about California traffic. Safe, she said quietly. I feel safe. Like everything's going to be okay. Like Robert's still here watching with me. And then the Tonight Show went to commercial. The screen cut to an advertisement for laundry detergent. A different voice. A different tone. And within seconds, Eleanor's eyes unfocused. The clarity faded from her face. She looked around the room, confused. Where am I? Who are you people? Dr. Chen and Karen exchanged shocked looks. The transformation had taken less than 10 seconds. Eleanor was gone again. For the next 11 minutes and 30 seconds, the exact length of the Tonight Show minus commercials, Eleanor Chen had been completely herself. And the moment Johnny Carson's voice stopped, she disappeared. Dr. Chen immediately began documenting everything. She stayed in room 407 for the rest of the night, taking notes, asking Karen questions, reviewing Eleanor's medical charts. At 7 a.m., when Margaret arrived for her morning visit, Dr. Chen was waiting for her. Margaret, I need to show you something. But you have to promise me you'll stay calm. Margaret's heart sank. Is my mother worse? Is she? No. The opposite. But I don't want you to get your hopes up yet, because we don't understand what's happening. Dr. Chen explained everything that had occurred the previous night. Margaret listened in complete silence, tears streaming down her face. So you're telling me that my mother, who doesn't know my name, who doesn't know where she is, she spoke clearly. She remembered my father? She knew who she was? For 11 minutes and 30 seconds, yes. Because of Johnny Carson? Because of his voice. We don't know why. But we're going to test it tonight. That evening, at exactly 11:28 p.m., Margaret sat in room 407. Dr. Chen stood nearby with a clipboard. Karen turned on the television. The Tonight Show theme music played. Ed McMahon announced Johnny's name. Johnny walked through those curtains. And Eleanor turned her head. Her eyes focused. That's Johnny, she said. Margaret grabbed her mother's hand. Mom? Mom, it's me. It's Margaret. Eleanor looked at her daughter. Really looked at her. Margaret. My Margaret. Oh sweetheart, when did you get here? Margaret collapsed into sobs. I'm here, Mom. I'm right here. Don't cry, baby. I'm okay. I'm a little confused, but I'm okay. Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand. You look tired. Are you taking care of yourself? For the next 11 minutes, Margaret and her mother had a real conversation. They talked about Margaret's childhood. About Eleanor's wedding to Robert. About family vacations. About recipes Eleanor used to make. Eleanor wasn't perfect. She still had gaps. She still forgot certain things. But she knew who she was. She knew who Margaret was. She was present. And when the commercial break came, She was gone again. "Who are you?" Eleanor asked, looking at Margaret with confused eyes. Margaret was devastated and hopeful at the same time. Dr. Chen spent the next 6 weeks documenting this phenomenon. Every single night at 11:28 p.m., they would turn on The Tonight Show. And every single night, for exactly 11 minutes and 30 seconds, Eleanor would come back. Dr. Chen tested everything. She tried playing recordings of Johnny Carson during the day. It didn't work. She tried playing other television shows. It didn't work. She tried playing recordings of Robert's voice, Eleanor's deceased husband. It didn't work. Only live broadcasts of The Tonight Show brought Eleanor back. Only Johnny Carson's voice in real time could unlock her memory. Dr. Chen wrote up the findings. She submitted them to medical journals. They were rejected. Too anecdotal. Not scientifically reproducible. Likely a coincidence or placebo effect. But it wasn't a coincidence. It happened every single night for 6 weeks. Margaret didn't care what the journals said. For 11 minutes every night, she had her mother back. And she would take every second she could get. But there was one problem. Johnny Carson had no idea any of this was happening. Margaret decided to write him a letter. She sat down at her kitchen table with a pen and paper, and she told Johnny Carson everything. About her mother's Alzheimer's. About the 241 days of silence. About the night Karen turned on the television. About the 11 minutes of miracle every single night. "Mr. Carson, I don't expect you to believe this. I don't fully understand it myself. But your voice is bringing my mother back from Alzheimer's. For 11 minutes every night, I get to talk to my mom again. And I needed you to know that whatever you're doing, whatever you've been doing for 22 years on television, it matters more than you could ever imagine." She mailed the letter to NBC Studios in Burbank. She didn't expect a response. 3 weeks later, Margaret's phone rang. "Hello, is this Margaret Chen?" "Yes. This is Johnny Carson." Margaret almost dropped the phone. "I received your letter. And I've been speaking with Dr. Chen at Stanford Medical. She confirmed everything you told me." Margaret couldn't speak. "Margaret, I'd like to meet your mother. Would that be all right?" 2 weeks later, Johnny Carson walked into room 407 at Stanford Medical Center. No cameras. No press. No publicity. Just Johnny, Margaret, Dr. Chen, and Eleanor. It was 11:15 p.m. Eleanor was asleep. Johnny sat in the chair beside her bed and waited. At 11:28 p.m., The Tonight Show began broadcasting on the television in the corner. Ed McMahon's voice filled the room. Eleanor stirred. Johnny's monologue started. And Eleanor opened her eyes. She turned toward the television. Then she saw Johnny sitting beside her bed. Her eyes widened. You're Johnny Carson." Johnny smiled warmly. "Hi, Eleanor. I heard you've been watching my show." Eleanor looked at Margaret. "Margaret, is this real? Is he really here?" "He's really here, Mom." For the next 11 minutes, Johnny Carson sat with an 82-year-old woman with Alzheimer's and talked with her like she was the most important person in the world. He asked about her life. About her husband Robert. About her memories. And Eleanor answered every question clearly, coherently, joyfully. When the commercial break came, Eleanor's eyes unfocused. "Who are you?" she asked Johnny, confused. Johnny took her hand gently. "Just a friend, Eleanor. Just a friend." He turned to Margaret. "I'm going to do something. I don't know if it will work, but I want to try." For the next 6 months, Johnny Carson recorded personalized messages for Eleanor. Short videos. Just Johnny talking directly to the camera, as if he were talking to Eleanor personally. "Hi Eleanor, it's Johnny. I hope you're having a good day." The staff at Stanford would play these videos throughout the day. They didn't bring Eleanor back completely. But they calmed her. They gave her moments of clarity. Brief flashes of recognition. Johnny never publicized any of this. He never mentioned it on his show. He never told the press. He just quietly visited Eleanor 3 more times before she passed away in November 1984. At her funeral, Margaret read a letter Johnny had sent. "Eleanor taught me something I'll never forget. My job was never just about making people laugh. It was about being a familiar voice in the dark. A constant presence when everything else felt uncertain. Eleanor showed me that sometimes, a voice can be a lifeline. And I am honored beyond words that my voice could bring her moments of peace." Margaret Chen is 94 years old today. She still watches The Tonight Show reruns. She works as a volunteer with the Alzheimer's Association, helping families navigate the grief of watching loved ones disappear. And she tells every single person the same thing. Never underestimate the power of a familiar voice. Never underestimate the healing that comes from consistency, from presence, from showing up every single day, even if it's just through a television screen. Medical researchers still study the phenomenon of musical memory persistence in Alzheimer's patients. They still don't fully understand why certain sounds, music, voices, rhythms, can unlock memories that medicine can't reach. But Eleanor Chen's case became foundational research. It changed the way hospitals treat Alzheimer's patients. It changed the way doctors think about memory. And it proved something profound. Love doesn't live in the brain. It lives somewhere deeper. Somewhere that even Alzheimer's can't completely destroy. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs hope today. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And remember, sometimes the smallest acts, a voice, a song, a moment of showing up, can unlock miracles that science can't explain.